Hello there, and welcome. You've stumbled into something unusual tonight. Not quite a history lecture and not quite a bedtime story. This is something in between. A journey into the past, the one designed to carry you gently toward rest. So get comfortable. Sink into your bed, your couch, or that one chair you probably shouldn't be falling asleep in. Because tonight, we're going back, way back, about 4,000 years to ancient Egypt. Now, before you panic, don't worry, you won't need a passport. And I'm not gonna quiz you on pharaohs and dynasties when this is over. This isn't school. This is the slow and dusty kind of history, the kind that drifts like desert sand, where even the strangest facts come with a yawn, perfect for sleep. So, let's begin. Picture the world you know now. The cars, the phones, the endless scrolling of screens. None of that exists. In fact, take all of that and put it in a little box in your mind, lock it away, and toss the key into the Nile River. Because in front of you, the land looks very different. Stretching out as far as you can see is a ribbon of green hugging a wide, muddy river, the Nile. On either side of that green ribbon, nothing but desert. Golden sand, endless, shimmering under the sunday. It's hot, it's dry, and there is no escape from it. This is the stage where daily life in ancient Egypt played out. And just so you know, you wouldn't last a single day here. Not one. And we're going to prove it. But don't worry, you don't actually have to do the hard work. You just have to imagine it. That's the safe, cozy part. Now, you might be thinking, ancient Egypt, pyramids, mummies, and pharaohs sitting on golden thrones, right? Well, sure. Those things existed. But daily life for most Egyptians wasn't about treasure-filled tombs or mysterious curses. It was about waking up early, eating scratchy bread, working until your back ached, and hoping the gods were in a good mood that day. See, the people who actually built the pyramids, they weren't mystical sorcerers. They were ordinary folks. Farmers, builders, bakers, fishermen, scribes. People with calluses on their hands and sand in their shoes. And, well, they look at us, with our soft mattresses and endless snacks, and probably shake their heads. Because, to them, comfort wasn't really a thing. Life was tough. Life was busy. Life was inconvenient. And that's exactly what we're about to explore. Why you, me, and pretty much anyone from the modern world wouldn't survive even 24 hours living their life. But before we dive into the heat, the dust, and the oddly questionable breakfast choices, let's just pause. Take a breath. Imagine standing at the edge of the Nile. The air smells faintly of wet reeds and clay. In the distance, you hear voices, people calling across the river, animals braying, the splash of oars against water. Somewhere nearby, someone is baking bread in a clay oven, and the scent drifts on the breeze. It sounds calm, doesn't it? Peaceful, even. Like a world stripped back to its basics. But don't be fooled. Behind that calm is a life that demands every ounce of your energy. And once the sun rises tomorrow, there will be no turning back. Now, this isn't a history lesson with bullet points. We're not going to march through kings and dates like soldiers in a parade. Instead, think of this as a day trip. We're going to follow the rhythm of a single Egyptian day, waking with the sun, eating what they ate, wearing what they wore, and trying our best not to faint in the desert heat. Spoiler, you will probably faint. But that's okay, because this is history for sleep, which means when the Egyptian sun gets too hot, you can just pull up the covers, close your eyes, and let me keep talking. So, what can you expect from this little adventure? Well, we'll start at the crack of dawn, when the sun god Ra drags his fiery bolt across the sky, and you're yanked out of sleep, whether you want to be or not. We'll peek into breakfast, though you might want to lower your expectations, because there are no pancakes, no orange juice, and definitely no coffee. We'll check the dress code spoiler again, it's linen, and it's itchy. We'll talk about hygiene rituals, like why everyone wore eyeliner, and why you might not want to borrow their toothpaste. We'll look at work, and oh yes, there was a lot of work. Farming in the blazing sun, building massive stone temples, or endlessly copying documents by hand. Then, as the day drifts on, we'll share a humble Egyptian lunch, peek at their games and entertainment, and finally, collapse onto a hard bed with a wooden headrest that might make you miss your lumpy modern pillow. And by the end, you'll understand exactly why you would not, under any circumstances, want to trade places with an ancient Egyptian. But don't worry, I won't rush you through it. We'll take our time. This is, after all, a boring history for sleep, which means everything comes slowly. Every detail unfolds at a gentle pace, so your mind has time to wander, to drift, to maybe even nod off. So if, at some point, you find yourself missing a fact or two, don't worry. That's part of the design. The Egyptians might have believed in eternal life, but I promise this history is not meant to last forever. For now, just rest in the knowledge that you are safe in your bed, and that 4,000 years ago, in a land of sand and stone, ordinary people were living their ordinary lives, which, by our standards, were anything but comfortable. So don't unpack just yet. You're only visiting. Tomorrow, you'll rise with the Egyptian sun and step into their world, if only for a day. But for now, let the desert settle in your mind. Feel the heat of the sun soften into a warm glow. Imagine the slow, steady rhythm of the Nile, flowing as it has for thousands of years. The story is waiting, and your day in ancient Egypt is about to begin. So, the night has passed. Not that it was particularly restful. Remember, your pillow wasn't soft. In fact, it wasn't a pillow at all. It was a carved wooden headrest, shaped a little like a curved block, meant to keep your head elevated and conveniently your hairstyle intact. Comfort? Not exactly. But the Egyptians didn't design for comfort. They designed for function. And whether you actually managed to sleep or just stared at the stars while mosquitoes buzzed past your ears, one thing is certain. The new day is here. In our world, mornings start with choices. You might hit snooze once, twice, maybe 4 times, depending on how optimistic you were when you set that alarm. You might linger under the covers, scrolling through messages, sipping coffee, letting the morning ease in gently. But in ancient Egypt, none of that exists. There's no alarm clock. There's no coffee. There's no gentle transition from sleep to wakefulness. There's only the Sunday. The Egyptians believed the sun was the god Ra, sailing across the sky in his golden boat. Each morning, he defeated the forces of chaos and rose again, flooding the world with light. And when Ra decided it was time to rise, so did you. No arguments, no excuses, no snooze button. The first light creeps over the horizon, spreading across the desert sands. It glows against the limestone walls of houses, gleams off the river, and suddenly there it is, brightness flooding your room. And your room doesn't have blackout curtains. It barely has walls. So, whether you like it or not, you're awake. You stretch, perhaps, though stretching is a luxury. The floor beneath you is hard-packed earth. The air is already warm, with the promise of heat to come. And you're not alone. Homes are crowded. Whole families sleep under the same roof. Parents, children, sometimes grandparents, and maybe a goat or two, depending on how prosperous you are. Privacy isn't a concept. And as the light of Ra fills the room, the whole household stirs. Children wake, animals bleat, neighbors begin their noisy routines. The village is alive all at once, because the sun says so. Now, you might wonder, what's the rush? Why rise so early? Couldn't they just sleep in? Well, no. The workday in ancient Egypt was ruled by the Sunday. If you were a farmer, you needed the daylight to tend your crops along the Nile. You had to check the irrigation channels, guide the oxen, plant, weed, harvest, whatever the season demanded. Agriculture was everything. Without it, no one ate. If you were a builder, perhaps one of the countless workers hauling stones, shaping bricks, or carving hieroglyphs into temple walls, then your day was defined by the light too. Construction under torchlight, not ideal. And if you worked in a temple, your duties were even more precise. Priests had to greet the gods with rituals at dawn, carefully washing statues, lighting incense, and presenting offerings. The gods didn't wait, so neither could you. In short, when Ra rose, the entire society rose with him. It's strange, isn't it? In our world, we often fight against the morning. We bargain with the alarm clock. We cling to dreams. We chase more sleep. But here, in ancient Egypt, the rhythm isn't negotiable. The sun is your boss. The sun is your schedule. And if you try to argue, well, the sun wouldn't care. So, here you are, awake. And honestly, already a little tired. You shuffle to your feet. Your linen clothing is simple, maybe a kilt-like wrap if you're a man, or a straight dress if you're a woman. It's not fancy, it's not cozy, it's practical. And soon enough, it will be sweaty, because the day ahead doesn't care about your comfort. Around you, the village is buzzing. Some people head toward the river, buckets balanced on shoulders, gathering water for the day. Others are already starting small fires for baking bread. Animals are herded toward fields. Children chase each other through narrow lanes, laughing before being shooed toward chores. It's barely dawn, and already the day is underway. Now, if you happen to be a scribe, one of the lucky few who can read and write your work might seem gentler. No heavy lifting, no farming under the blazing Sunday. Instead, you sit cross-legged with a palette of ink and a reed brush, copying records, writing letters, calculating taxes. But don't get too comfortable. That posture gets stiff, the ink stains your fingers, and mistakes aren't forgiven. Even a scribe's life was ruled by deadlines and not the kind you can push to next week. So, no matter what your station is, farmer, builder, priest, scribe, the message is the same. The sun is up, so are you, and the work has begun. And here's the part where you start to realize maybe you're not cut out for this. Because in our modern world, waking up this early with no choice, no caffeine, no soft lighting or cozy pajamas, it feels harsh. But for the Egyptians, it was normal, routine, a rhythm of life as natural as the river that sustained them. Still, as you blink against the brightness and shuffle toward whatever work awaits, you might already be longing for your soft bed, your snooze button, and the luxury of saying, just 5 more minutes. But don't despair. This is only the beginning of your Egyptian day. Ahead lies breakfast though. I should warn you, it's not exactly gourmet dining. Bread, beer, maybe some onions if you're lucky. Not the fluffy loaves or sparkling drinks, but coarse bread that grinds down your teeth, and beer that's thick, filling, and let's just say, different. Still, it's fuel, and you will need it, because once you've eaten, there's no hiding. Work wait, whether it's the field, the quarry, or the temple. Your role in this society demands attention. So for now, take a moment. Stand in the doorway of your mud brick home. Watch the sun rise fully over the horizon, blazing gold and red, climbing higher into the clear desert sky. It is beautiful, yes, majestic even, but it's also relentless. It doesn't stop, it doesn't dim. It rises higher and higher and higher just as your day begins. And so, as the sun god Ra sails his boat across the heavens, pulling the day forward, you too must begin your journey. The work is waiting. The day is long. And trust me, you'll be very, very tired by the end of it. So, the sun is up. The village is stirring. Farmers are already walking toward the fields, builders toward their projects, priests toward their temples, and you're standing in the middle of it all, still trying to wake up, still wishing you could crawl back onto your bed of reeds and pretend this isn't happening. But you can't, because before you can even think about working, you need breakfast. And I'll warn you now, this isn't going to be the kind of breakfast you're used to. In our modern world, breakfast might mean eggs and bacon, maybe pancakes with syrup, perhaps a bagel with cream cheese, or a steaming cup of coffee that practically yells, "Wake up." But here, in ancient Egypt, the menu is much simpler, much rougher, and much less Instagram-worthy. What you're about to eat is the same thing that nearly every Egyptian ate every morning for centuries. Bread, beer, and, if fortune smiles on you, a side of onion. That's it. No pancakes, no pastries, no whipped cream, no smoothies, no cereal with cartoon mascots. Just bread, beer, and onions. Let's start with the bread. Egyptians loved bread. It was the core of their diet, the thing they ate more than anything else. But before you picture a warm, soft loaf, golden brown and fragrant, let me stop you. This bread was not soft. This bread was not fluffy. This bread was tough. Made from emmer wheat or barley, it was dense, heavy, and often full of grit. Why grit? Because flour was ground on stone querns, and tiny fragments of stone ended up in the dough. So every bite was not just bread, but bread with a little bit of sand, like a built-in exfoliant for your teeth. And speaking of teeth, Egyptians' teeth tell us a lot. Archaeologists studying mummies often find that their teeth are worn down to nubs, full of cracks, cavities, and abscesses. Centuries of chewing coarse bread left mouths in terrible shape. Imagine starting your morning every day with a food that literally sanded down your teeth. Still, it filled the stomach. And that was the point. You shuffle to your feet. Your linen clothing is simple, maybe a kilt-like wrap if you're a man, or a straight dress if you're a woman. It's not fancy, it's not cozy, it's practical. And soon enough, it will be sweaty, because the day ahead doesn't care about your comfort. Around you, the village is buzzing. Some people head toward the river, buckets balanced on shoulders, gathering water for the day. Others are already starting small fires for baking bread. Animals are herded toward fields. Children chase each other through narrow lanes, laughing before being shooed toward chores. It's barely dawn, and already the day is underway. Now, if you happen to be a scribe, one of the lucky few who can read and write your work might seem gentler. No heavy lifting, no farming under the blazing Sunday. Instead, you sit cross-legged with a palette of ink and the reed brush, copying records, writing letters, calculating taxes. But don't get too comfortable. That posture gets stiff, the ink stains your fingers, and mistakes aren't forgiven. Even the scribe's life was ruled by deadlines, and not the kind you can push to next week. So no matter what your station is, farmer, builder, priest, scribe, the message is the same. The sun is up, so are you, and the work has begun. And here's the part where you start to realize maybe you're not cut out for this. Because in our modern world, waking up this early with no choice, no caffeine, no soft lighting or cozy pajamas, it feels harsh. But for the Egyptians, it was normal, routine, a rhythm of life as natural as the river that sustained them. Still, as you blink against the brightness and shuffle toward whatever work awaits, you might already be longing for your soft bed, your snooze button, and the luxury of saying just 5 more minutes. But don't despair. This is only the beginning of your Egyptian day. Ahead lies breakfast, though I should warn you, it's not exactly gourmet dining. Bread, beer, maybe some onions if you're lucky. Not the fluffy loaves or sparkling drinks, but coarse bread that grinds down your teeth and beer that's thick, filling, and, let's just say, different. Still, it's fuel, and you'll need it, because once you've eaten, there's no hiding. Work waits. Whether it's the field, the quarry, or the temple, your role in this society demands attention. So for now, take a moment. Stand in the doorway of your mud brick home. Watch the sun rise fully over the horizon, blazing gold and red, climbing higher into the clear desert sky. It is beautiful, yes, majestic, even, but it's also relentless. It doesn't stop, it doesn't dim. It rises higher and higher and higher just as your day begins. And so, as the sun god Ra sails his boat across the heavens, pulling the day forward, you, too, must begin your journey. The work is waiting, the day is long, and trust me, you'll be very, very tired by the end of it. So, the sun is up, the village is stirring, farmers are already walking toward the fields, builders toward their projects, priests toward their temples, and you're standing in the middle of it all, still trying to wake up, Still wishing you could crawl back onto your bed of reeds and pretend this isn't happening? But you can't. Because before you can even think about working, you need breakfast. And I'll warn you now, this isn't going to be the kind of breakfast you're used to. In our modern world, breakfast might mean eggs and bacon, maybe pancakes with syrup, perhaps a bagel with cream cheese, or a steaming cup of coffee that practically yells, "Wake up." But here, in ancient Egypt, the menu is much simpler, much rougher, and much less Instagram worthy. What you're about to eat is the same thing that nearly every Egyptian ate. Every morning, for centuries. Bread, beer, and, if fortune smiles on you, a side of onions. That's it. No pancakes, no pastries, no whipped cream, no smoothies, no cereal with cartoon mascots. Just bread, beer, and onions. Let's start with the bread. Egyptians loved bread. It was the core of their diet, the thing they ate more than anything else. But before you picture a warm, soft loaf, golden brown and fragrant, let me stop you. This bread was not soft. This bread was not fluffy. This bread was tough. Made from emmer wheat or barley, it was dense, heavy, and often full of grit. Why grit? Because flour was ground on stone querns, and tiny fragments of stone ended up in the dough. So every bite was not just bread, but bread with a little bit of sand, like a built-in exfoliant for your teeth. And speaking of teeth, Egyptians' teeth tell us a lot. Archaeologists studying mummies often find that their teeth are worn down to nubs, full of cracks, cavities, and abscesses. Centuries of chewing coarse bread left mouths in terrible shape. Imagine starting your morning every day with a food that literally sent it down your teeth. Still, it filled the stomach. And that was the point. For men, this usually meant a simple kilt-like wrap, a piece of linen tied around the waist, reaching to the knees. For women, it meant a straight, form-fitting dress, sometimes held up with straps over the shoulders. Children, for the most part, wore nothing at all until they were older. And honestly, in that heat, who could blame them? Wealthier Egyptians might have fancier versions, pleated kilts, longer dresses, even transparent linen layered for style. But for the average person, clothing was simple, practical, and endlessly washable. Well, washable is a strong word. More like rinse it in the Nile and hope for the best. Now, you slip into your Egyptian linen. At first, it feels light, breezy, even. You think to yourself, this isn't so bad. I can do this. But then, you notice something. The sand. Because sand is everywhere. It's in the streets. It's in your house. It's on your skin before you even leave the doorway. It drifts into your sandals, grinds into your clothing, sneaks under your linen wrap. No matter how much you shake, brush, or adjust, the sand always wins. You thought the gritty bread was bad? Just wait until you realize you'll never again feel truly free of sand. It's the eternal companion of every Egyptian clinging, scratching, rubbing in all the wrong places. Speaking of sandals, let's talk about footwear. Egyptians had sandals made from woven papyrus or leather. They were simple, flat, and practical. But here's the thing, not everyone wore them. In fact, many people went barefoot most of the time. Why? Because sandals wore out quickly, and when your daily life involves trudging through fields, hauling loads, or stomping around in the dust, sometimes it just seemed easier to go without. So, imagine yourself stepping out of your mud brick home. The ground is hot. The sand is rough. You're wearing your linen wrap, already sweating a little, and now you're deciding whether to bother with sandals at all. Either way, the result is the same. Sand in your toes, dust on your feet, grit everywhere. For the wealthy, of course, things look different. Nobles and royals had fine, bleached linen garments, sometimes elaborately pleated or decorated with beads. Their sandals were better made, their clothing better tailored, and they could afford servants to launder and press their garments with care. But you're not wealthy. You're just trying to get through the day without your clothes sticking to you in awkward places. And here's the truth. In the desert heat, even the finest linen becomes uncomfortable. Sweat soaks through quickly. Dust sticks to damp skin, and the fabric clings in ways that make you wish you could just not wear anything at all. Which, again, might explain why children got a free pass until their teenage years. Now, you might be thinking, at least they had some variety in colors, right? Not really. Most Egyptian clothing was plain white or off-white, because dyeing linen was expensive and not practical for daily wear. Wealthier Egyptians sometimes added jewelry, necklaces, bracelets, amulets to bring a little sparkle. But for the average worker, your outfit was linen. Always linen. White, beige, maybe brown if you've been wearing it for too long without rinsing it. So your closet wasn't really a closet. It was probably just a folded stack of nearly identical linen wraps and dresses. Laundry day was less about what will I wear, and more about which piece smells the least like sweat and river water. And let's not forget the accessories. Cosmetics, for instance, weren't just for fashion. Men and women alike lined their eyes with kohl, that striking black eyeliner made from ground minerals. It wasn't only about beauty. It helped reduce glare from the sun and may have even kept away infections. Practical glamour. Some people shaved their heads and wore wigs, especially in the upper classes, because wigs were cooler and easier to keep clean. But again, you're not upper class. You've got your hair tied back, sand stuck to your scalp, and sweat dripping down your forehead. So, there you stand, dressed in your linen, barefoot, or in flimsy sandals, sand scratching against your skin, the desert heat already pressing down on you. This is the Egyptian dress code. Simple, practical, and inescapably inconvenient. It's not about style, it's about survival. And here's the thing, the Egyptians didn't really complain about it. To them, this was normal. This was life. Linen kept them cooler than anything else could. Sandals were optional, and sand was simply part of existence. They accepted it the way we accept traffic jams, spam emails, and socks that vanish mysteriously in the laundry. But you, standing here with grit between your toes and fabric sticking to your back, might already be longing for the soft cotton of modern clothes, the cushioned comfort of sneakers, the miracle of air conditioning. You'd last a few hours, maybe, but a lifetime of this? Probably not. Still, your outfit is complete. You're dressed, if not comfortable, and the day waits for no one. Ahead lies work, fields to plow, stones to haul, temples to serve. But before you get there, there's one more part of the morning routine. Hygiene. And you might be surprised to learn that the Egyptians cared quite a bit about keeping clean, though their methods were unusual. Bathing in the Nile, toothpaste made from crushed rock, eyeliner for sun protection. It's not quite your morning shower, but it's what they had. So shake the sand from your sandals, or don't bother putting them on at all, and let's see how the Egyptians kept themselves looking and smelling presentable. So you're dressed. Your linen is tied, your sandals are, well, somewhere near your feet, and sand has already found its way into every fold and crease of your outfit. Congratulations, you look like a perfectly ordinary ancient Egyptian. But before you head out to work, there's one more step. Hygiene. Because even in the baking sun, even in a land where dust and sweat are unavoidable, the Egyptians cared deeply about keeping themselves clean. And their daily rituals were, let's just say, a little different from what you're used to. Let's start with bathing. Today, if you want to wash, you step into a shower. Warm water flows at the twist of a handle. Soap foams, shampoo lathers, the steam fills the air. But in ancient Egypt, forget plumbing, forget hot water, forget privacy, even. Here, bathing meant going to the Nile River, the same Nile where people fetch drinking water, the same Nile where they washed clothes, watered fields, fished, and, well, where animals also waded and did whatever animals do in rivers. Still, this was the lifeline of Egypt, and it was the place where people cleaned themselves every single day. Now, don't picture a leisurely bubble bath. No candles, no salts, no floating flower petals. Bathing here was practical. Splash water on your body, scrub with a natron-based paste that's a mixture of salts and minerals, and rinse. done. If you were wealthy, you might have had a private basin at home, servants to pour water, perfumed oils to rub on your skin. But for most people, it was the Nile. Always the Nile. And they did it often. Egyptians were almost obsessive about washing. Herodotus, the Greek historian who loved to write about other people's habits, claimed Egyptians bathed multiple times a day. Whether he exaggerated or not, the truth is clear. Cleanliness mattered to them. Why? Partly because of the heat. When you live in a desert climate, sweat is inevitable. Dust is unavoidable. Without washing, life quickly becomes uncomfortable. But it wasn't just about comfort. It was about health and even about religion. To the Egyptians, purity of the body was connected to purity of the spirit. Priests, especially, had to bathe several times a day before performing rituals. Ordinary people might not have been quite as strict, but the idea was the same. Washing kept you clean in every sense of the word. So, if you're standing by the river now, splashing water onto your skin, you're not just cooling off. You're participating in a ritual that was as much spiritual as it was practical. But bathing was only the beginning. Afterward, you'd rub oil into your skin to keep it from drying and cracking in the relentless Sunday. Without lotion, desert air quickly turns skin into leather. So, Egyptians made do with oils from plants and animals, often scented with herbs or flowers. Think of it as the ancient version of moisturizer, except without the fancy packaging or extra hydrating labels. And then, of course, came makeup. Now, when you picture ancient Egyptian makeup, your mind probably goes straight to those dramatic, almond-shaped eyes lined with thick black coal, Cleopatra, staring regally across the centuries. Pharaohs, queens, nobles, all immortalized in statues and paintings with dark eyeliner that stretched far beyond the corners of the eye. But here's the surprising part. This wasn't just for beauty. Yes, eyeliner looked striking. Yes, it was fashionable. But it also had a practical purpose. The black coal reduced glare from the harsh Egyptian sun, much like athletes today might smear black under their eyes. It was ancient sunglasses, painted directly onto the face. And that's not all. Coal also contained lead-based minerals that, strangely enough, help prevent eye infections. A little dangerous by modern standards, perhaps, but in the dusty, fly-ridden environment of the Nile, this makeup may have saved more eyes than it harmed. So, whether you were a farmer or a pharaoh, lining your eyes wasn't vanity, it was survival. And eyeliner wasn't the only cosmetic. Green malachite was used as eyeshadow, red ochre tinted lips and cheeks, henna stained nails and fingertips. Both men and women wore makeup, and not only for beauty. It was believed to have protective properties, guarding against illness and evil spirits. So, if you're standing in front of a polished bronze mirror right now, carefully smudging black coal along your eyelids, you're not just making yourself look good for the day, you are protecting your health, shielding your eyes, and honoring a tradition thousands of years old. And then, there was the matter of breath. Because remember breakfast, bread, beer, onions, delicious, perhaps, but not exactly freshening. Egyptians, aware of this, invented their own version of toothpaste. Except, their recipe was a little rough. Imagine brushing your teeth with crushed rock, ashes, and sometimes even burned eggshells. Add a bit of honey for flavor, and you've got ancient toothpaste. Effective at cleaning, perhaps, but harsh. In fact, archaeologists believe this gritty paste did more harm than good, wearing down enamel and leaving teeth even weaker. So, while you stand there, dutifully scrubbing your teeth with a mixture of powder and twigs, you might wonder whether fresh onion breath wouldn't have been the better option after all. And finally, let's not forget hair. Egyptians often shaved their heads not only to keep cool but also to avoid lice. Wigs were common made of human hair or sometimes plant fibers, styled in elaborate fashions for the wealthy. Ordinary people kept it simple, but cleanliness always mattered. So, after a bath, your oil, your makeup, your rough brush of the teeth, you smooth down your hair or adjust your wig, you glance at your reflection in a shiny piece of polished bronze. And surprisingly, you don't look half bad. You look Egyptian. But don't get too comfortable. Because while you might feel clean, refreshed, and ready to take on the day, what's waiting outside isn't gentle. The sun is rising higher. The fields are calling. The quarries, the workshops, the temples all demand attention. And working ancient Egypt is no small matter. It's backbreaking, relentless, and utterly exhausting. So, while you adjust the last line of coal under your eye and take one final deep breath of perfumed oil, enjoy this moment. This feeling of being clean, cared for, and, in your own way, glamorous. Because the next chapter of your day will not be glamorous at all. So, you're dressed in linen. You've splashed in the Nile, rubbed a little oil on your skin, brushed your teeth with what was essentially crushed rock, and lined your eyes with coal to keep the glare at bay. You look the part. You smell acceptable. You're as ready as you'll ever be. And now comes the part of the day you've been dreading. Work. In our world, work might mean answering emails, sitting in traffic, attending meetings, or maybe standing on your feet all day in a shop or a cafe. Hard in its own way, sure. But in ancient Egypt, work was, well, brutal. There were no ergonomic chairs, no coffee breaks, no logging off at 5 o'clock. Here, work meant the kind of physical labor that left your back bent, your hands blistered, and your body exhausted from sunrise to sunset. And no matter who you were, farmer, builder, or even scribe, there was no such thing as an easy day. Let's begin with the farmer. Farming was the backbone of Egyptian life. Without it, no one ate, no temples were built, and no pyramids rose from the desert sands. So, if you're a farmer, your day starts in the fields along the Nile. Depending on the season, you might be planting seeds, tending crops, or harvesting grain. And it wasn't just planting and picking. You had to maintain irrigation channels, making sure water flowed where it was needed. You had to guide oxen pulling plows made of wood, often through stubborn, heavy soil. You had to cut papyrus, gather reeds, and collect dates or figs when the season allowed. And all of this, under the Egyptian Sunday, relentless, blinding, and hot enough to bake bread without an oven. By midday, you're drenched in sweat, your linen clinging uncomfortably, sand grinding into every crease of your skin, and you still have hours to go. But maybe you're not a farmer. Maybe you're a builder. Ah, yes, builders. The workers who carved, hauled, and constructed the monuments we marvel at today. The pyramids, the temples, the statues, all the things that make ancient Egypt famous. But let's be clear, building those wonders wasn't glamorous. Stones weighing tons had to be dragged, hauled on sledges, levered into place by sheer human effort. Mud brick had to be shaped, dried, stacked, and carried. Walls had to be painted in the heat. Inscriptions carved painstakingly into stone with bronze chisels. It was exhausting, dangerous work. Your hands would blister, your muscles would ache. Injuries were common, crushed fingers, broken bones, heat stroke, and yet this was daily life for thousands of Egyptians. Builders weren't slaves in chains, as popular myths sometimes suggest. They were ordinary workers, often given food, beer, and shelter as payment. But even so, the labor was relentless. And if you think your boss is demanding, imagine one who insists you keep hauling limestone until a monument tall enough to touch the gods is finally finished. Or maybe, just maybe, you're a scribe. At first, this sounds better. No hauling stones, no sweating in the fields, no sand in your sandals. Just sitting quietly with a reed brush, writing on papyrus. Sounds easy, right? Not so fast. Being a scribe required years of training. You had to memorize symbols, learn how to write them with precision, and understand the complexities of a language that had hundreds of signs. There was no spell check. Every record had to be perfect text rolls, harvest counts, legal documents, temple prayers, and while you might not be breaking your back, you'd be breaking your patience. Sitting cross-legged on the floor for hours at a time, hunched over, your brush in one hand, your ink palette in the other, your eyes strained in the light, your wrist cramped, And one mistake, that could mean trouble. So yes, being a scribe spared you the blisters of a builder and the calluses of a farmer, but it came with its own kind of exhaustion. And what about women? They worked, too. Many ground grain for bread, a task so repetitive and so grueling it wore down their hands and knees. Others wove cloth, brewed beer, or helped in fields alongside men. Even children had jobs, gathering wood, carrying water, or herding animals. Everyone contributed, because in Egypt, work wasn't optional. Work was survival. Now, imagine this. The sun is directly overhead. The Nile glitters in the distance. You've been working since dawn, and your body is already aching. Sweat drips into your eyes, despite the cold. Your back screams as you bend, lift, and carry. Your stomach growls, because breakfast, that gritty bread, that onion, feels like a distant memory. And yet, you push on, because you have to. This is the rhythm of Egyptian life. Endless, necessary, backbreaking work. Of course, the Egyptians weren't without rest. Workers sometimes paused for shade, for water, for a moment of relief. Festivals and religious holidays offered breaks from the grind. And even in the toughest labor, there was community laughter, songs, stories told while working side by side. But still, you, a modern visitor, would likely collapse before midday, your hands unaccustomed to tools, your skin unprepared for the Sunday, your body spoiled by soft chairs, running water, and climate control. You wouldn't make it, not for long. And yet, for the Egyptians, this was life. Not easy, not gentle, but normal. And in a way, their willingness to endure this daily grind gave us the wonders we marvel at today. The pyramids still standing, the temples still impressive, the papyrus records still legible after thousands of years. All of it built on sweat, sand, and sheer determination. So, as you wipe your brow, sore and tired from just imagining this kind of labor, take a moment to appreciate the resilience of those who lived it. Because when you step back from the fields, the quarries, the scribe's bench, you realize that what was ordinary for them would be nearly impossible for us. And you also realize you're hungry again, which is convenient because it's time for the midday meal. And if you thought breakfast was humble, just wait until you see what's on the menu for lunch. So, you've been up since dawn. You've sweated through your linen. Your back is sore, your arms are tired, and your body is begging for a break. The sun is high now, glaring mercilessly overhead, and the thought of resting in the shade with a meal almost feels like salvation. It's lunchtime in ancient Egypt. But before you get too excited, I should warn you, this isn't the kind of lunch you're used to. There are no sandwiches with neatly sliced cheese, no fresh salads drizzled with dressing, definitely no dessert menu. Here, food is simpler, rougher, necessary, yes, but not exactly luxurious. Let's start with the staple of every Egyptian meal, bread. If breakfast began with bread, lunch continues with bread, and dinner ends with, yes, more bread. The Egyptian diet was built on it, as unshakable as the pyramids themselves. But don't imagine soft loaves, warm from the oven, their crusts golden and their centers fluffy. Egyptian bread was dense, heavy, chewy, and filled with surprises you probably wouldn't enjoy. That's because grinding grain in ancient Egypt meant using stone tools, and those stone tools wore down little by little every single day. Tiny chips of grit, flakes of stone, and grains of sand found their way into the flour, which means every time you bit into bread, you were grinding your teeth against tiny rocks. Over a lifetime, it destroyed people's mouths. Archaeologists often find Egyptian skeletons with teeth worn down to the roots, not from sugar, not from candy, but from bread. So, as you chew your midday meal now, savoring a chunk of coarse barley bread, just remember, it might fill your stomach, but it's also slowly sanding down your teeth like a carpenter, smoothing wood. But don't worry, there's more than bread. Beans, for one. Lentils, chickpeas, broad beans boiled, mashed, or stewed into something resembling a thick paste. Protein-rich, filling, but far from glamorous. And onions too. Egyptians loved onions. They ate them raw, they cooked them into stews, they believed they had healing properties, even spiritual power. So, if your breath wasn't already questionable after breakfast, lunchtime onions made absolutely certain of it. If you were lucky, there might also be fish. The Nile teemed with them. Tilapia, catfish, perch. They were caught with nets, lines, or even woven traps, and they added a welcome variety to the diet. But here's the problem. Preserving fish in the desert heat was not easy. There were no refrigerators, no ice boxes, not even a cool cellar to keep food fresh. So fish had to be eaten quickly, or it had to be dried and salted. Dried fish was common, salted fish too. But neither smelled particularly pleasant, especially after sitting out under the Egyptian Sunday. So, when a platter of fish is passed to you at lunch, don't expect crisp freshness. Expect pungency. Strong, nose-wrinkling pungency. And yet, this was a treat. Protein, flavor, variety, even if the smell was less than divine, Egyptians valued it. If you were wealthier, your lunch might include meat, goat, duck, goose, maybe even beef. But meat was expensive and not a daily staple for most. Ordinary workers couldn't afford it often. It was more likely reserved for feasts, offerings to the gods, or the tables of the elite. For the average person, the diet remained plain. Bread, beans, onions, maybe fish, and of course, beer. Yes, beer. Not the frothy golden drink you might imagine, but a thick, cloudy brew closer to liquid bread than anything you'd find in a modern pub. Egyptians drank it daily, at every meal, children included. It was safer than water, filling, and provided calories to keep you going. So, alongside your coarse bread and onion stew, you sip a cup of this grainy, porridge-like beer. Nutritious? Yes. Refreshing? Not exactly. But to Egyptians, it was essential. Now, let's talk about preservation. We take it for granted today. Refrigerators hum quietly in kitchens. Freezers store food for months. Even canned goods line shelves for years. But in ancient Egypt, none of that existed. Food had to be eaten quickly before it spoiled. Grain was stored in sealed silos, protected from pests. Dried fish and meat could last longer, but never indefinitely. Fruits and vegetables spoiled within days. Milk soured quickly in the heat. So, meals were, by necessity, simple and repetitive. Freshly made, eaten quickly, rarely stored for long. If you wanted variety, you depended on the Nile's floods, the rhythm of the seasons, or your social class. So picture it now. You're sitting in the shade of a mud brick wall, maybe under a simple woven awning. The sun beats down outside, but here, there's at least a little relief. Before you, a basket of bread, rough and dense. A bowl of beans, mashed into a paste. Onions sliced open, their smell strong in the air. Perhaps a plate of dried fish, salty and sharp. Beside it all, a jug of beer, thick and filling. This is your lunch. You chew slowly, carefully, mindful of the grit in the bread. You sip the beer, heavy and grainy, wondering how it's possible to feel both full and thirsty at the same time. You glance at the fish, debating whether the flavor will outweigh the smell. And you realize this isn't a feast. This isn't comfort food. It's fuel. Plain, simple, sometimes unpleasant fuel. Enough to keep you going until the evening. And yet, it works. Your body feels the calories, the strength returning after hours of work in the Sunday. The bread fills you, the beans satisfy. Even the pungent fish has its place, heavy but sustaining. And as you finish, wiping sweat and crumbs from your face, you know you'll be back at work soon. The fields still need tending, the stones still need hauling, the scribe scrolls still need writing. Lunch is only a pause, not an escape. So you stand again. You stretch your aching back, brush sand from your linen, and return to the day. And as you walk, you can't help but wonder, how did they do this? Day after day, year after year. The same food, the same toil, the same endless cycle of bread, beer, and sweat. And the answer, of course, is that they had no choice. It was life. Ordinary, repetitive, sometimes monotonous, but life. And if you thought for even the moment that you could last a day here, this lunch has surely reminded you otherwise. But before the afternoon drags you back into labor, before the sun dips low and the long shadows stretch across the land, there's one more thing to consider. The Egyptians lived not only with food and work, but also with faith, because here, every meal, every field, every river, every task was tied to something greater, the gods. In the afternoon, as you return to your duties, you'll see how deeply religion shaped their every step. You finish your lunch. Your belly is heavy with bread, beans, and that cloudy Egyptian beer. Your breath, thanks to the onions, could probably scare away a crocodile. You've wiped the sweat from your brow, stretched your tired muscles, and now it's back to work. But before you so much as lift another tool, plant another seed, or touch another papyrus scroll, you need to remember something. In ancient Egypt, nothing happened without the gods. Everywhere you look, their presence is woven into daily life. The sun you squint against, that's Ra, sailing his boat across the sky. The river you washed in this morning, that's Hapi's gift, the flood that keeps the land fertile. The fields where you toil, Osiris watches over them, god of agriculture and rebirth. Even the simple act of eating lunch, that bread, that fish, that beer, isn't just fuel. It's a blessing granted by divine order, part of a cycle maintained by the gods. For the Egyptians, the world was alive with the sacred. It wasn't just a place where gods existed, it was a place where gods ruled every detail. So, what does that mean for you, a visitor trying to make it through one day here? It means religion is everywhere. In your work, in your meals, in the amulets tied around people's necks, in the rituals carried out at temples. And yes, in the endless superstitions that guide every action. Let's start with the temples. Unlike modern places of worship, temples in Egypt weren't community gathering spots. Ordinary people didn't just walk in and chat with the gods. Temples were the homes of the gods themselves, and priests acted as caretakers. Every day, priests performed rituals. At dawn, they bathed, shaved their heads, and purified themselves. Then they entered the sanctuary, where the statue of the god resided, hidden from public eyes. They would wash the statue, anoint it with oils, dress it in fine linen, and offer food and incense. This wasn't symbolic. They believed the god literally inhabited the statue and needed care just as humans did. The ritual was daily housekeeping for the divine. So while you're sweating in the fields, priests are gently scrubbing down a golden figure of Horus, making sure he's well-fed, perfumed, and dressed. It's hard not to feel jealous, even though you're supposed to admire the devotion. But it's not just the temples. Even in the humblest homes, religion shaped the rhythm of life. A farmer might leave a small offering at a household shrine before heading to the fields, a bit of bread, a splash of beer, maybe a flower. A mother might whisper a prayer to Tawret, the hippo-shaped goddess of childbirth, to keep her children safe. A fisherman might mutter thanks to Sobek, the crocodile god, for sparing him another day. Religion wasn't a separate category of life. It was life. And you? If you want to fit in, you'll need to play along. So you carry a small amulet. Maybe it's the Eye of Horus for protection against illness. Maybe it's a scarab beetle, symbolizing rebirth and the rising Sunday. These little charms are everywhere, worn on cords, tucked into clothes, even placed in bread loaves. Each one is a promise, a shield, a little piece of magic to help tilt fate in your favor. Because fate in Egypt is fragile, and the gods must always be appeased. Now, let's talk about superstition. The Egyptians were practical in many ways, skilled builders, careful record keepers, keen astronomers, but they were also deeply superstitious. If your eye twitched, it might be a sign from the gods. If a cat crossed your path, it wasn't just a cat, it was sacred, a messenger of Bastet. If you dreamt of water, it meant one thing. If you dreamt of fire, another. Entire books of dreams existed, filled with instructions on how to interpret them. Every event, every accident, every strange occurrence was loaded with meaning. So, when you stumble over a rock on your way back to work this afternoon, don't just laugh it off. Someone nearby might see it as a sign, maybe a warning, maybe a blessing, but never just an accident. And then there are the festivals. Egypt loved festivals. Almost every god had one, and these celebrations filled the calendar with music, feasting, and ritual. For ordinary people, they were one of the few chances to visit the temple, to watch the god's statue carried out in procession, to take part in communal joy. Imagine the relief. After weeks of endless toil, suddenly there's music, dancing, food, and beer flowing freely. But don't get too excited. Festivals weren't every day. Most days, life returned to the usual grind, broken only by small personal rituals, a whispered prayer here, a humble offering there. It might seem overwhelming. Every action watched, every breath tied to divine order. Gods in the sky, gods in the river, gods in the fields, gods in your dreams. But for the Egyptians, it wasn't a burden, it was reassurance. To live in harmony with the gods was to keep the world in balance, what they called Ma'at, the principle of order, justice, and truth. Without it, chaos would reign. The sun wouldn't rise. The river wouldn't flood. Life itself would unravel. So each offering, each prayer, each superstition wasn't just habit. It was a thread in the vast fabric of cosmic balance. And if you think that sounds dramatic, well, for them, it wasn't. It was simply the way the world worked. So here you are, wiping grit from your teeth after lunch, trudging back to your task, amulet swinging at your neck, maybe whispering a quiet plea to whatever god governs your trade. You are tired, yes. Hungry still, probably. Sweaty, without a doubt. But you are also connected to Ra in the sky, to Osiris in the soil, to Isis in the home, to Anubis waiting patiently for the day you'll need his guidance. Every step you take is watched. Every action has meaning. You might not last a day here physically, but spiritually, you're already woven into the endless cycle the Egyptians lived by. And when the day finally begins to cool, when the sun dips lower and shadows stretch across the land, it won't be work or prayer that fills the evening. It will be something far more human. Music, games, storytelling, the little joys of entertainment after a long, back-breaking day. Because even in a world ruled by gods, people needed laughter, too. And as the evening arrives, you'll see just what passed for fun in a land without Netflix. The sun is finally lowering, drifting toward the horizon. The fields are quieting, the tools are set down, the sweat of the day clings stubbornly to your skin, the gods have been honored, the work is done, and the promise of rest is near. But before you collapse onto a reed mat, there's still something else. Even in ancient Egypt, after a long day, people craved entertainment. No television, no phones, no endless scroll of social media. And yet there was music, there were games, there was laughter. Life, no matter the century, finds a way to be fun. Let's start with music. If you walk through an Egyptian village in the evening, you'll hear it. The soft beat of drums, the twang of a lute, the high notes of a flute carved from reeds. Musicians might gather in courtyards, in homes, or even out in the open air. Children clap along, women hum melodies, men sing work songs that echo the rhythm of the Nile. In wealthier households, professional musicians performed, plucking harps and strumming lyres, their voices rising in songs that praised the gods, or teased out tales of love and mischief. For ordinary people, music was simpler but no less joyful. A hand striking a drum, a voice carrying into the dusk enough to turn a hard day into a softer night. And you, exhausted but curious, find yourself tapping your foot to the beat. It's not Spotify, but it doesn't need to be. The rhythm is timeless, comforting, human. But music wasn't the only joy. There were games. Egyptians loved games, both simple and elaborate. The most famous, of course, was Senet. Picture it, a board with 30 squares, arranged in 3 rows of 10. 2 players each with a set of pieces. Dice-like sticks decide your moves. The goal? To guide your pieces safely across the board, navigating the whims of fate, avoiding traps, and hoping the gods favored your progress. It wasn't just a game, it had spiritual weight. The journey across the Senate board symbolized the soul's journey through the afterlife. Winning meant more than bragging rights, it meant cosmic approval. But in the evening, around the table, it was also just fun. Families gathered, friends laughed, pieces clacked against the wooden boards. Children played smaller versions, while adults took it seriously, their pride at stake in every move. And Senate wasn't alone. There were dice games, stick-throwing contests, and versions of checkers. Even tug-of-war and juggling were known. So if you sit with the family tonight, someone will hand you a Senate piece, smile knowingly, and challenge you to try your luck. Be warned, they've played this game since childhood. You, on the other hand, are already struggling to remember the rules. Spoiler, you'll lose. Of course, what's an evening without food and drink? Dinner wasn't extravagant, not much different from lunch, honestly. More bread, beans, onions, maybe a bit of fish if you were lucky. But beer flowed freely, and in some homes, wine too. Brewing beer was almost an art form. It wasn't clear and crisp like modern lagers, more like a thick, porridge-like drink made from barley, sometimes flavored with dates or herbs, sometimes left plain. It was filling, nourishing, and endlessly consumed. So as you sit with the family in their courtyard, the clay cups pass around. Everyone sips, wipes their mouths, and sighs contentedly. The children laugh. The grandparents tell stories of the gods, of kings, of ancestors. Someone claps along to a drumbeat. Someone else brings out the game board. And the day, which seemed so long and exhausting, now feels lighter. Family gatherings were the heart of evening life. There were no theaters, no cinemas, no arenas filled with spectacles. Entertainment was intimate, woven into the fabric of home. Fathers taught sons to carve wood or mend nets. Mothers showed daughters how to grind grain, weave linen, or braid hair. Grandparents told stories long, winding tales of myths, of heroes, of times before. Storytelling was as much a pastime as music or games. Imagine sitting in the glow of an oil lamp, the scent of burning fat mixing with the desert air, while an elder recounts the tale of Isis searching for Osiris, or Ra battling the serpent Apophis in the underworld. The children listen wide-eyed, the adults nod knowingly. The stories have been told 1,000 times, but each telling feels new, alive, important. And you, the stranger among them, feel swept into this current of voices that have carried on for millennia. Sometimes, entertainment spilled out of homes into the wider community. Dancers might perform in the marketplace, balancing on their toes, swirling linen skirts, moving with a rhythm both graceful and hypnotic. Acrobats bent and flipped, showing off feats of strength. Singers told bawdy songs, poking fun at neighbors or even the gods themselves. Laughter rang out, mugs clinked together, and for a few precious hours, everyone forgot the toil of the day. It was simple, it was small, but it was joy. Now, as you sit back, belly full of bread and beer, ears filled with music and stories, you might think, maybe, just maybe, you could get used to this. Maybe the evenings make the mornings worth it. Maybe the laughter makes up for the sweat. But before you get too comfortable, remember, the day isn't finished yet. Because eventually, the music fades, the game pieces are packed away, the drums quiet, the voices soften, the oil lamps burn low, and it's time to sleep. Ah, sleep. The promise of rest after an endless day. But in ancient Egypt, even that came with its own challenges. Because when you finally lay down to close your eyes, you won't find a soft mattress, fluffy pillows, or the hum of cool air conditioning. Instead, you'll discover what it really means to try and rest like an Egyptian. And believe me, it's not the kind of luxury you're dreaming of. The music has faded, the drums are quiet, the game of Senet is packed away, the clay cups rinsed and stacked, The laughter softened into murmurs. The stars are beginning to appear above the desert sky, sharp and clear against the darkness. The air is cooler now, though cooler in Egypt still means warm enough to keep you sweating. It's bedtime. Finally. After waking with the sun, after a breakfast of onions and coarse bread, after sweating through endless hours of labor, after prayers, offerings, and a lunch that smelled more pungent than refreshing, after games and music, now you're ready to collapse. But don't get too comfortable, because sleeping like an ancient Egyptian was not exactly restful. First, let's talk about beds. If you are wealthy, you might have a wooden frame, slightly raised off the ground, with woven reeds stretched across it like a hammock. On top of that, perhaps a mat, maybe even a linen sheet if you were really lucky. If you were an ordinary worker, however, your bed was the floor. A simple mat of reeds or straw laid directly on the hard ground. Comfortable? Not really. Practical? Barely. But either way, rich or poor, your head rested on the same invention, the wooden headrest. Now, picture this. Instead of a soft, fluffy pillow that cradles your head, imagine a curved piece of wood balanced on two supports, like a little stand. That's what Egyptians used. The idea was to lift your head slightly, keeping it cool at night. In the heat of Egypt, a fluffy pillow would have trapped sweat and dirt. The wooden headrest allowed air to circulate. It was practical, but was it comfortable? No, not unless you enjoy falling asleep with your skull balanced on what feels like the edge of a small shelf. Archaeologists find these headrests everywhere, often placed in tombs so the dead could rest peacefully. But peaceful is a generous description. So, as you lay down tonight, your body sore from work, your head wobbling on a piece of polished wood, you realize rest is going to be a challenge. And then there are the other problems. First, the heat. Egypt doesn't exactly cool down at night. Even in the shade of your mud brick home, the air clings to your skin, heavy and unmoving. There are no fans, no air conditioning, no chill glass of water on the nightstand. Just heat pressing against you, making sleep slippery and elusive. Second, mosquitoes. The Nile may have given life, but it also gave insects, clouds of them, buzzing, biting, relentless. Egyptians used nets sometimes or smoked herbs to drive them away, but most nights you simply endured. So while you toss and turn on your reed mat, trying not to roll off your wooden headrest, you're also slapping at your arms and legs, swatting at creatures that hum right in your ear the moment you start to drift off. Peaceful? Hardly. If you were wealthy, you might have oils or perfumes to dab on your skin, perhaps even servants fanning you as you try to sleep. For everyone else, though, it was just you, the heat, the bugs, and the hard floor. And remember, privacy was rare. Families slept together in one room, sometimes alongside animals, chickens, goats, maybe even a cow in the corner, depending on the household. So not only do you have mosquitoes and heat, but you also have the occasional bleat or cluck to interrupt your dreams. It's less peaceful slumber, more noisy campground. Yet somehow, Egyptians managed. They drifted off under the stars, lulled by exhaustion more than comfort. They dreamed of gods and journeys, perhaps inspired by stories told earlier in the evening. They found rest, even if it wasn't perfect, because they had no other choice. And tomorrow, the cycle would begin again. The sun would rise. Ra's boat would sail across the sky. Farmers would head to the fields. Builders would pick up their tools. Scribes would bend over their scrolls. Bread, onions, beer, sweat, prayer, games, sleep. The rhythm of Egyptian life repeating endlessly. And you, lying there, uncomfortable, restless, sweaty, itchy, sore, you realize something. You wouldn't last a day here. Not with their bread that wears down your teeth, not with their heat, their bugs, their endless work, not with their wooden pillows, their pungent fish, their sand in everything you own. After one sunrise to sunset cycle in ancient Egypt, you'd be begging to go back. Back to soft pillows, back to cool drinks, back to the luxury of air conditioning and Netflix. The romance of pyramids and pharaohs fades quickly when you're the one actually living it. But here's the thing. For the Egyptians, this wasn't hardship. This wasn't a novelty. It was life. And in that life, they built one of the most enduring civilizations the world has ever known. They raised temples that still tower today. They crafted tombs whose walls glow with painted stories. They developed art, writing, medicine, and architecture that continues to inspire us thousands of years later. They endured the heat, the bugs, the work, the hard mats, the wooden headrests, and they thrived. You might not last a day, but they lasted millennia. So as you finally close your eyes, shifting uncomfortably on your reed mat, swatting one last mosquito, you can't help but admire them. Their resilience, their devotion, their ability to find joy in music, in games, in family, in rituals. Life wasn't easy, but it was full. And as sleep finally claims you, carry on the hum of crickets, the distant splash of the Nile, and the faint glow of starlight overhead, you understand why Egypt was called the gift of the Nile. Not because it was comfortable, but because it was enduring. So, good night. Rest your head on your wooden pillow. Try not to roll off. Try not to scratch the bites. Try not to let the heat win. And dream, if you can, of pyramids in the distance, of gods sailing across the sky, of the endless rhythm of a civilization that refused to fade. Because tomorrow, if you were truly here, it would all begin again. And I suspect you wouldn't make it that far.